Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Show. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the editor at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. Frazer, big weekend for your boys. How was everything? Tell me, welcome to the Tom Aspinall Show more than anything, but how was the weekend for yourself, Frazer?
I told you, I've been telling you for weeks, I've been telling everyone for months since he joined the UFC. He's the business. It was obviously a big weekend, all British MMA wise. In the UFC, it could have been even better. We had Matt Giacchesi fall off, we had Lerone Murphy fall off, but it is what it is. The guys, we went four out of five, was obviously just spoiler alert if you haven't watched it. Darren Till losing in the main event, and we got some big performances. Three out of the four that won got a 50k bonus. So yeah, I'm excited to jump straight into it and chat over each of the standouts with you.
Yeah, and this was the card that was scheduled for London, obviously moved over to Vegas due to COVID stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's all totally reasonable. Let's jump right in on the Tom Aspinall. He's now four wins in the UFC heavyweight division, four finishes. The only one of them ever made it to the second round. Most of them were in the first 2 minutes here. And then this weekend he knocked out I think a top 15 ranked Sergey Spivak. I think he was ranked at 13th and Aspinall was at 14th, or the other way around. I don't quite remember, but Sergey Spivak landed 0 strikes in this fight. Tom Aspinall landed 16 and ended the fight at 2 minutes 30 seconds. I mean, that was a great. He did the clinch. He was doing his usual stuff, which is the fast one too. But the stuff that he's really good at, that's a little bit harder to train into guys because you can't just do it on a heavy bag or you can't just do it on like hitting pads. Is cage cutting. He does a lot of control. He's always controlling the center of the octagon. His main technique is this really fast 1-2, a lot of overhands. But really, I think the signature mark is his pressure, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I've watched the fight three times. I watched it live, and then I've watched it twice yesterday. Just because, to be honest, it took me a grand total of under 10 minutes to watch it three times. That's how quick the fight ended. But Sergey Spivak, for a start, it's no joke. He's a good fighter, and this was a fight that we know was booked previously and fell off, and then I think Aspinall got a new opponent, but it was just his pressure is what we were talking about last week with the Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley. Woodley was following Paul around. I know, yes, it's a ring and an octagon, it's slightly different. And yes, it's two different sports, boxing and MMA. You've got to be wary of the takedown, wary of the leg kick. Yeah. But movement is movement. If you want to cut down the ring or the octagon, you can't just follow your opponent around in sort of like almost like two magnets, not attracting to each other. You have to quite literally, I know it sounds simple to us because we've watched it week in, week out, we've watched it for years, but cut off the octagon, make your opponent have to check that. You can't just follow them around. You've got to make your opponent check their step and go, they're circling around to the left. You then cut the octagon, they've got to go to the right, but that's you setting something else up. And it's the footwork of Aspinall. He's straight from the off. He's come out orthodox. He switched straight to southpaw. We saw everything from Aspinall in this. We saw all of the realms of mixed martial arts. I think that Spivak did try and take him down. Aspinall was able to use his takedown defense and use the defense itself to prevent the takedown from Spivak. And like you say, it's the pressure of Aspinall is overwhelming sometimes. I think this is definitely his best performance. Yes, the Arlovsky performance was good, and he's a much more experienced fighter than Spivak, but you saw everything. You saw Aspinall's head movement. He didn't quite, I've said before that the one worry for me with Aspinall is that he keeps his chin quite high up in the air and he relies on his reactions a lot. But I think in this fight, he measured his distance so well. He was feinting inside and out and making Spivak react. And there were big reactions out of Spivak early on in the fight. And, I think I said it for a week. I just think he's the whole package. I think he really can go all the way.
No, I think, yeah, I was going to say, I think next year he's going to be competing for a title because something like cage cutting, as you and I were alluding to, is famously hard to do in an octagon. Mirko Cro Cop was always the example we went to of this guy's so good at ring cutting, and then he has absolutely no clue what he's doing in a cage. It's actually really hard to cut someone off in a circular kind of shape. And Tom Aspinall seems to do it. He's extremely fast. He looked really good. He worked from inside the clinch. He did the same side knee, same side elbow to a knockout, which was really good because I liked in the clinch that the way that he was holding the bicep and he kept his legs way back. He wasn't thinking about wrestling when he was in the clinch. He was thinking about striking, and he knocked him out from the clinch. And I really do like that because as we see kind of consistently, and we're going to see later on the card, British guys don't have that wrestling background. So if he's going to clinch with an idea that I'm going to strike with them, and he's going to stand in a manner of I'm not wrestling, I'm striking in the clinch, he's going to have a lot of success. It's not a very wrestler heavy division, and I don't know how Aspinall's wrestling is. I know he has a good submission game, he has fairly good jiu-jitsu, but as for wrestling, he, like, as long as he avoids a Curtis Blades, he can probably get a title shot in 2022 more than it. Like, am I wrong in my scheduling here? What do you think?
No, I think, yeah, I agree with, we always go to Curtis Blades as the wrestler in the division, because it's not like, you haven't got a Khabib and a Makachev and a Chandler and an Oliveira who you don't want to take down because you don't want to be on the ground. And that's just in the lightweight division. You got Curtis Blades, who you don't want to go to the ground with. No longer got Daniel Cormier, who's obviously the solid wrestler. Mm-hmm. Stipe's got a good wrestling base, but he's also a Golden Gloves champion. He likes to stand up with people. Yeah. And it's interesting what you touched on with looking to strike in the clinch, because that's something that I think Bisping picked up on the broadcast. Is if we obviously they are teammates, and we are jumping ahead slightly to the Darren Till fight, but Till actively wanted to go into the clinch because of his Muay Thai background, but he was getting caught out by Brunson's wrestling. Now, I think because Aspinall has the ground game to fall back on, if worse comes to worse, he's in the clinch, he can strike, and he throws a knee and it gets caught by Spivak and he gets taken down. He's got his BJJ black belt to fall back on. Now, Till doesn't have a jiu-jitsu game, really, especially as we saw at the weekend, And Aspinall has got that jiu-jitsu game that he can throw strikes in the clinch and not be afraid. Those knees, he wasn't just throwing the knees to just, stay active in the clinch and try and keep his opponent off or warn his opponent from clinching with him again. They were knees to land and to hurt. They weren't just, we see Kamaru Usman's foot stomps. Yes, they work, but they're more volume.
Yes.
Aspinall was throwing strikes in the clinch to hurt Sergey Spivak, and we saw it excuse me, on the break, that the elbow, I didn't even really see, it didn't seem to me like it landed awfully heavily, but it didn't spin Spivak back, and it didn't, he landed the elbow and it was just landed in the exact right position on the temple, bang over the top on the break where Spivak didn't have his hands up. Mm-hmm. And it just caught Spivak, and obviously that was the beginning of the end, and he finished it off with ground and pound. It was just, I think it was a really, really good performance, and especially, like you say, to take no strikes in a heavyweight fight is in any fight, but especially in a heavyweight fight, you don't want to be taking these big winging punches from these big guys, because it's going to, you can only take so many punches in your career, and to take none at all is, I think it capped off a brilliant performance. And then, the post-fight press conference, I think, from Aspinall was spot on as well, in my opinion.
So tell me about the post-fight press. I didn't catch it. I got the fight only. What happened in the post-fight presser?
Well, I just feel that because he's got Darren Till in his camp, not in his corner, but in his camp, he's training with him day in, day out. He was saying, look, I'm in no rush. I'm not scared of the top guys, but I know that I'm not ready to fight them yet. Now, that's what I think. I think he's having, and I know it's maybe not ideal for Till himself, obviously, but I feel that Till was rushed into a title shot when he fought Tyron Woodley.
Absolutely.
He beat Bojan Veličević, I think, by decision, which is,
he's not in the UFC anymore.
That's all you need to say, exactly. Then he fought a declining Cowboy in the main event and beat him. That was, in my opinion, just Cowboy doing Cowboy, not taking a young prospect seriously.
Yeah. Then
he fought Stephen Thompson, and he won the fight on the cards, but it wasn't, that if you scored it for Thompson, that's, it's not going to be a robbery for Till. And then with the title shot. So it was the UFC almost rushing Darren Till into, right, we'll give you Veličević. And then from what I remember, it was a matter of months later, he was fighting Cowboy in the main event, and then main eventing in Liverpool, and then main eventing in a title shot.
Yep.
Rushing through. He didn't have that murderer's row of where you've got a fight. I can't remember the sort of state of the welterweight division, but he wasn't fighting the top 10, then top 8, then top 6 for the title eliminated. The title eliminator was Stephen Thompson, who just fought for the belt or recently fought for the belt. But it's not always you can't just have one title eliminator from a cowboy who's, let's be honest, he's not a 170, he's a 155er. You can't just fight one natural world-class 170 pounder and think that you can just beat the whole division. It was the confidence maybe got the better of him. Whereas with Aspinall, he called for a fight with a Blagoy Ivanov. So he knows that, the UFC could easily put him in. I've seen people online say, put Aspinall in against Derek Lewis. What's the point? Why are we trying to rush him into a fight with Derek Lewis? He beats, I've said it 1,000 times, he beats Derek Lewis and he beats him handily. But why rush him and put him in that? I'd like to see him in a main event next against an Ivanov. He's main evented UFC cards in the past in his debut against JDS. But he's not rushing his career, and I think that's really, really sensible for Aspinall.
Yeah, I think it's a very wise choice. Because especially at heavyweight, you can take a lot of damage early and then never really be the same fighter. You can rush in a little bit too much. Ivanov is a fair fight. I mean, I would love a Marcin Tybura, even a Rosenstruck. I think he would beat. But if he's not in a rush, then maybe we'll postpone that title shot to 2023. Because so far he's looked absolutely flawless. Flawless victory. He's taken no damage. He can take a fight next month if he wanted to. But we'll see what the future holds for him. I think you are absolutely correct with the Darren Till was rushed into a title shot. I remember that as well. And now, I mean, he's not like having amazing success in the UFC. Tyron Woodley's not having amazing success in the UFC, so it's a little bit tough to assess. But he was absolutely rushed. The UFC will always choose their guys, and like, these are my guys. These are the guys we like, and we're going to give them a special favor. So you got one win in the top 5, maybe, and it was a close win. You're a top contender. And I think we just saw this last week with the booking of Rose Namajunas versus Weili Zhang doing the rematch rather than putting Carla Esparza at women's strawweight, because Carla Esparza is like on a 6-fight win streak. She's so clearly the top contender. There's even a storyline there that she was the champion and she beat Rose already. But they chose Weili Zhang, who has no title defenses, but you know why? She's one of their people. That's one of their folk. She's a draw, right? So the UFC will always choose, if there's 2 paths forward, one is like, this is a bit more of a sport, and the other one sells more pay-per-views. I'm always going to pick the pay-per-view angle, right?
Exactly. And like you say with the Wiley, I think she has got the one title defense against Joanna, hasn't she? But that was the fight of the year.
That's right. So she won it and then defended against. Okay,
exactly.
But forgot about that.
That's probably why they want to tap into that. She's an entertaining fighter. Fight of the year against Joanna. They want to tap into that Chinese market with her. With Till, they obviously wanted to tap with the sort of end of Bisping's career. They want Leon Edwards is deserving of a title shot, but he's not the big draw. Till taking over the British mantle as good talker, good on social media, good fighter from what we saw against Cowboy and whatnot. So they're wanting to rush, and I think, especially as well, we'll talk about Paddy Pimblett shortly, but
sure.
With Aspinall, you've got Paddy Pimblett, you've got Darren Till ahead of you, both of which are brash talkers willing to go and put their name out there. With Aspinall, slow and steady, and silent assassin, sort of, not Vicente Luque, but Tom Aspinall, he's going about his business, he's getting it done, he's getting these performances and night bonuses. He's knocking off the names. He's fought 2 guys to see what kind of level he's at in the UFC. Fought Arlovsky, the former champion. Now he's breaking into the top 15. He's beating ranked guys now, and then you just take it step by step and step by step. You don't rush him into let's not put him against Stipe Miocic next or John Jones next. Like you say, I want to see next, if the Ivanov fight doesn't come to, I want to see him against a Tybura, and then after that maybe a Rosenstruck. Then test him against a wrestler, because you don't want that caveat when he goes into a title shot. That was the thing with Conor McGregor. Before he fought Chad Mendes, never fought a wrestler. Fought Chad Mendes, and he was ever so slightly exposed in the wrestling realm, but he managed to get it done. But maybe then you put Aspinall versus a Curtis Blades, so it can't be that. Yeah, he's good, but he's only ever fought strikers, or only ever fought low level wrestlers. You put him up against the guys, but you have to build it slowly. He's still only, I think, 20, 28, 29.
Fairly young, especially for the heavyweight division.
exactly, you know, and it's so yeah, he's 28 years old, and so there's no rush for Aspinall, and I think, you know, I've said it for a year. I think he'll be UFC champion one day, and you know, it's because he's so young, and like you say, the heavyweight division has a older age cap, as it were.
It does.
It's there's no, and you know, he might like Till, he might take some losses, but with the heavyweight division, it takes one punch to knock someone out. So he might take a loss and then he'll bounce back with three fairly quick. You know, if he's taking fights against people like Sergey Spivak, who's just got a win over Alexei Oleinik, who's, you know, a solid fighter, he can take these knocks week after week if he needs to be, just getting back into that title shot should he lose. But you know, especially from the performance at the weekend, I can't see him losing anytime soon.
Oh, he a flawless performance. He just was absolutely outstanding. But we can't bury the lead any longer. We really have to jump into the main event now. Like we can't just dance. We hinted at it. We can't go back around to it. So we'll jump right into it. Derek Brunson defeats Darren Till. I mean, he controlled him on the ground. Lots of takedowns. There's not a huge amount to have learned from Derek Brunson because we knew that if he was going to win, it was going to be on that path, that he was going to continuously take him down, land some good ground and pound. Now his ground and pound looked much improved. His takedowns looked really good. He wasn't just doing the usual bending at the waist and jumping in for takedowns, although at some points he was still doing that. I mean, Darren Till looked bad off of his back. He really didn't have any answers for him, and that's more so of how good Derek Brunson was. But Derek Brunson still didn't look incredible. Like now we have this clear top four at middleweight. And I think Brunson is the weakest of them because his striking is notably bad. Even in a fight where he's winning and he's landing lots of takedowns and controlling it, he almost got like knocked down in each round of this fight from strikes from Darren Till, who barely had any strikes, who barely threw any strikes in the whole fight. I mean, I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but what I'm getting at is I'm just not overly impressed, even on a win with Derek Brunson. Defeating Darren Till via wrestling is good. Good job, but you took a lot of strikes in that time. What did you see in the main event of this fight?
I was disappointed in Darren Till, to be honest. You know, the caveat going into the fight was he's hard to get down, but when you do get him down, he's even harder to keep down. It's not that proved to be untrue. This in the main event, you know, it's Brunson got him down and kept him there for as long as he almost wanted to, you know, and then with 30 seconds left in the first round, Till got back up to his feet. Well, but he didn't do anything with that 30 seconds, you know. He rushed out, and I thought, you know, here we go, Till straight on the front foot. But I can't seem to think of any strikes that, you know, I watched it again yesterday. I can't seem to think of any strikes that Till threw that weren't a 1-2 for the first two rounds, or in the third round he started opening up with the leg kicks. And we'll go back to it and we say it week in, week out. What's your game plan? Avoid the takedown and hope that you land the 1-2 on, you know, and he was, you know, in the third round, he almost, like you say, it looked like he was landing easily on Derek Brunson, which I think is going to be a flaw going forward for Brunson, even in his career, you know, as established as he is as a fighter now. He's what, 38, 37, 38?
Yeah, he's up there, isn't he? Yeah.
And he still hasn't shored up his defense. And yes, Till is a good striker, but if for Brunson, you've been all but lying on the guy for two rounds, and he's still got enough pop in his shots to land on you, you know, slick 1-2s. And it's worrying for Brunson going forward, because obviously the talk is going to be, you know, we got a question on Instagram, how do you think if it's booked, Israel Adesanya and Derek Brunson 2 goes? If Darren Till's landing on Brunson that easily, is he's landing on him even easier? You know, he's got better takedown defense. It goes in my opinion, it goes the exact same as the first. But with Till, you know, he looked a lot smaller than Derek Brunson in there, and it wasn't that he looked smaller in physical. It just the way that Brunson was able to control him. I think Till is probably a 175-pound fighter, like we say, with a lot of fighters that are 165 or he can't weight 170 anymore. But he didn't look. We've seen him at 170 and he's ripped. You know, he's got the six pack. He's got he's ripped. You know, you can see his veins because he's got no body fat on him. He looks like a slightly out of shape middleweight, And
Yeah.
if you think about it, his two fights at middleweight, debut against Calvin Gastelum. Gastelum is a lazy welterweight.
Yes.
He's a welterweight who just can't be bothered to cut, so fights at middleweight. Robert Whittaker used to be a welterweight, was killing himself to get down there, and has built himself into a middleweight frame, but it's still not one of the biggest middleweights. He won't make welterweight again, but he's also not making 205. So he's fought two people that could make welterweight. Brunson's never making welterweight.
No.
He's a big guy. He has to cut a lot to get down to 180, or diet a lot and then cut a lot to get down to 185. Until didn't look, Till's whole thing was, when he was coming up, it's unfair. I'm a light heavyweight fighting a welterweight and all this. He now looks like the undersized guy. And in the wrestling game where he's been exposed, he got taken down twice by Robert Whittaker, which arguably led to the loss.
Yep.
Obviously been taken down in this fight, which arguably, well, not arguably, it did lead to the loss.
Yeah.
I say arguably, yeah, there's no really denying it. And, I know we're talking a lot about Till, but it's a standard Derek Brunson performance. He could have done, I think he probably could have finished Kevin Holland that way if he wanted to, but he was almost playing with Holland, And what have we really learned about Derek Brunson in his last two fights? He's in his last three fights even, he's fought Shabazian, who was exposed to have had no cardio and pretty poor wrestling.
True.
Kevin Holland exposed to have absolutely zero wrestling.
Yes.
And Darren Till exposed to not being able to defend multiple, in the second round, he defended the first two takedowns that Brunson threw at him. And you were thinking, oh, hello, he's got Brunson's timing on the takedowns. He's, maybe he's now being able to defend him on the break. But it was the third, fourth, fifth, sixth takedown that Brunson was trying, and the relentlessness. You can defend one takedown in training. You can defend two takedowns in training. But then it's the third, the fourth, the fifth. When you're tired, you've got the mouse under your eyes swelling up, you're tired. You felt his strength. Brunson's ground and pound he was winging it from way behind him down on Darren Till, and that was impressive. But even then, he's winging this ground and pound until seeing the punches coming from miles away, and not, just a hand on bicep would have just prevented that. He's winging it, and if you just put the hand on the bicep, you can't. You can probably still land on Till, but it's not going to land with the same ferocity as if you've got the entire swing of it. And he seemed to be exposed on the floor. And I don't want to say that Till needs a new team. He's got to leave Team Carbon, leave Colin Heron behind, but go and train with other people. Go down to London Shoot Fighters. It's obviously based in the UK. Go down to London Shoot Fighters. Go across to Dublin and train with SBG, who, they're not renowned for having outstanding wrestling there. Go over to the Paris MMA factory. Travel the world, because we know that he's not scared to travel because he lived in Brazil for so long learning Muay Thai. But go and learn. I've seen a tweet from Kamzat Chimaev saying, look, Till, come and train All Stars in Sweden with me. And do that. It's not disloyal to go and train with other teams. It's disloyal to completely, sort of drop your team and just go and move to another team because you have one loss. This is multiple losses now, and it's all, Kevin Holland's training at AKA because he's seen the flaw in his game and he's trying to improve that. Darren Till needs to do that now. And it's not that he's leaving Team Carbon, it's that he's trying to better himself. He's putting his career first. We've seen people aren't happy that he says, oh, I don't care about my baby, I don't care about my girlfriend, all this.
Yeah, I remember this. He hasn't said that in a few years. I think that was a wise thing to shut up about.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying there. And if he still does hold that view of me first, career first, all of this, go and do stuff that's going to sort of echo that, as far as going to train with a different team, travel out to AK. I know it's difficult with the pandemic and whatnot, but obviously travel restrictions aren't, he's in Vegas. He managed to get over to Vegas. So go and train with AK, have a month at ATT. Extreme Couture is obviously a wrestling based gym. Go over to these places and have people that, who has he got training with? Yes, he's got Tom Aspinall, and Mike Grundy, but Grundy's a featherweight. And yes, he's a solid Commonwealth Games wrestler, but he's a featherweight. And it's not going to be the same strength. Tom Aspinall is going to be able to get Till to the ground easier because he's just much bigger. Go and train with an Usman. Go and train with a Marvin Vettori. I know they've had their back and forth, but go and train with these people and look to get better at the floor in your game. There's plenty of, that's been the knock on. It was a knock on Bisping, on Dan Hardy, and now on Darren Till, that the English high-level mixed martial artists don't have good wrestling. And it's not taught in our schools, but it's taught from a young age. You're on the mats in America. So make the commitment to going over to America for a month or 2 months a year and just really nailing that wrestling.
Oh,
and I think it'll pay dividends for him, to be honest.
No, absolutely. If you've been wrestling for 5 years and you feel pretty strong, you have no experience compared to someone who started wrestling, like you said, at age 11, right? Like Derek Brunson's probably been wrestling other good wrestlers since he was like 12 years old. So that's been like 20 years of this. Yeah, he's going to out wrestle some guy who just picked up some jiu-jitsu and just picked up wrestling. Absolutely. And I think one thing that you were alluding to was there's a lot of other solutions to counter wrestling, and a lot of it can be in stance, but instead he was clinching with chest to chest. Well, you're just inviting the wrestler in, right? Like you're just kind of giving the wrestler opening rather than trying to hold the bicep, rather than trying to maintain distance, rather than kicking out the legs and trying to maintain, like the way that Israel Adesanya really does his blocking and his distance management is how he defends takedowns. There's no opportunities. There's fewer opportunities for takedowns. Whereas if you just kind of wade into distance, yeah, you gave Derek Brunson the takedown. But I do agree. Absolutely needs to work on changing camp. Even spend 6 weeks somewhere and then just go back home. You should do that. Just put on the singlet, train with someone like Daniel Cormier, do it for 6 weeks. And I think that's the right thing to do. But Derek Brunson's having a little bit of a career resurgence right now. He was before a gatekeeper or a person where if your popular champion or your next guy in line needed an easy win, Derek Brunson was your guy. And he found a niche with being the only wrestler in a striker's division. For whatever reason, middleweight has no wrestlers. It's just a bunch of strikers. Yeah, Marvin Vettori is the next best wrestler in that division for reference, right? And now somehow he's on a 5-fight win streak. Middleweight is so well tied. It's a tidy, organized division. There's a clear top four with Jared Cannonier, Derek Brunson, and then we clearly have Robert Whittaker versus Israel Adesanya. Who's standing at the last of this final four? How do you see a Cannonier versus Brunson fight going? And then, how do you see this middleweight division playing out?
Yeah, I think, like you say, Whittaker Adesanya is next. There's no denying that. And I think we alluded to it last week. If Till was to have beaten Brunson, he gets the next shot, maybe.
UFC likes him a lot.
Exactly. But that's it's all irrelevant now because he can't defend a takedown. So I think it depends what Brunson wants to do. We know that the UFC don't give title shots to people who just deserve them. Otherwise, Leon Edwards would have got a title shot 3 years ago, 2 years ago, maybe. So Brunson's got to get into a position where he's eliminated all of the division ahead of him. He has a loss to Adesanya. He has a loss to Robert Whittaker. So what he needs to do now, I think, is beat Jared Cannonier or beat the winner of Vittori Costa to really solidify himself as there are no other contenders that I have not beaten other than the champion and the guy that he's fighting. And whoever wins out of that one, I'm the next guy. I'm not going to have the champion sit out for a year while I beat the guy that the champion's just beaten or who's just beaten the champion, So whether, let's say the rematch goes the same way, Izzy beats Rob Whittaker, Cannonier's not going to, Brunson's not going to sit out and say, right, when Whittaker's fit and healthy, I'll wait for 6 months for him to get back in the right headspace, 4 months to promote the fight. Then I'll fight him, potentially lose again and ruin my title shot. He's got to say, right, Izzy beat Robert Whittaker in 6 months' time. He's going to be fit, and I want Israel Adesanya. He called for the fight after the fact the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I think because if he lost a decision to Adesanya or a late knockout, it'd be a lot more appealing to the UFC. But he was dominated by Adesanya in New York when they fought. So it's a hard sell. But with that being said, it's a hard sell, but you can say on the highlights package, look at this TKO of Edmund Shabazian. look at this submission of Darren Till. You know, he's getting the finishes now. You know, it's his first submission since 2013. So,
and he's headlined 3. Those were 3 headliners in a row.
Exactly.
He's in it now.
Exactly. And you know, he's doing what Leon Edwards arguably doesn't do. He's getting the finishes. He's getting the sound bites. You know, he's in the face of the camera saying, you know, Israel Adesanya, you're next, and all this. And
yes,
that's what we like to see. We like to see someone, even if he's not going to get the shot, we like to see someone, you know, that little clip can be clipped, it can be cut, and that's straight in the promo. And the TKO victory over Edmund Shabazian, straight in the promo. Submission over Darren Till, straight. The big slam on Darren Till, straight in the promo.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other side, you've got Israel Adesanya landing at will on Brunson when they first fought, straight in the promo. You know, you've got that package all sorted out already. They don't have to have another fight, either of them, really, to promote that fight. But Robert Whittaker's next. So I think that's the difficult thing for Brunson. But I think Brunson's also happy. He said, "I'm not broke. I'm happy to sit out and see how the rematch goes, and then, you know, almost wait his turn." So, but ultimately, I think whether it's Adesanya or Whittaker, that's an argument for another day. But both of them beat Brunson fairly convincingly, in my opinion. He's too easily hit. He's too easily hit for either of them.
No, I do agree with you. A lot of his defensive flaws still are relevant. He's just kind of figured out to be even better offensively, but defensively he hasn't improved a huge amount. And that's some of his bigger weaknesses was always defensive striking. And Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, that's a whole other show. We're gonna do like 2 hours on that one fight in the future, so we won't do that one too much. So Derek Brunson is he's in the top contenders kind of talk now, and that's a really good place to be with that. One quick fight I wanted to touch on was Khalil Rountree versus Modesta Bukakas. I said, watch for violence in this fight. Regardless of what happened, we got some violence in this fight. And boy, was I right. Just in the most brutal fashion imaginable. Khalil Rountree uses, I think they called it an oblique kick. Is that still the technically correct term, even when it comes to the side of the knee? Like, it was almost at the thigh kind of thing. But
yeah, it's almost like a oblique stomp, isn't it? Rather than, because I wouldn't class that as, you know, you kick a football or a soccer ball, you know, you kick out a leg like Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor or Edson Barboza. You don't kick like with the sole of your foot.
Yeah,
that's very much a stomp, and it brings up the debate again. Should it be illegal? No. If you're allowed to elbow someone directly in the temple on the floor from anything but a 6 to 12, and you're allowed to flying knee your opponent in the face.
Mm-hmm. This is fine.
These are all that's fine, but you're not allowed to stomp to the knee. And if you're allowed to brutalize your opponent, you know, we're both massive fans of leg kicks. You know, we were excited for the Edson Barboza fight a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
The state of Uriah Faber's leg when he fought Jose Aldo, that you could also say, okay, let's outlaw leg kicks. You know, it's not good. It could be long lasting. And it happens. You know, Robert Whittaker blew his knee out against Romero when they fought due to the same technique.
Exactly the same thing. Yep.
These things happen, and John Jones has used it hundreds of times.
Well, and then Robert Whittaker used it against Yoel Romero in their next fight. Like, they were just trading knee stomps back and forth.
And Bukowski, I don't want to butcher his name, but Bukauskas, I think, yeah, there or thereabouts. He was saying, look, don't. He's come out on Instagram or Twitter and said, look, don't have a go at Khalil Rountree. It's a legal technique, and I should have done better to defend it or prepare for it even. So clearly the fighters haven't got a massive issue. Even the fighters like Bukowski is the first, from my memory, first ever person in the UFC at least to be finished like that.
Absolutely.
We've had leg kick TKOs a number of times now, but a leg stomp TKO like that is, you know, these things are legal techniques. You need to prepare for everything. You need to prepare for the low calf kick, the legs, the oblique kick, oblique stomp, the kick to the thigh, the body kick, the teep kick, the knee. This is why MMA is such a difficult sport, and you know, these well-rounded mixed martial artists are so difficult to prepare for, because they can throw all of these at you. But these are all legal techniques, and until if the UFC come out next week and say, okay, oblique kicks are illegal now, well, let's address. There's so many more issues in the sport of mixed martial arts that are actual fouls. The eye pokes, we saw it in the first fight of the night. There was groin strikes and eye pokes, and let's address the bigger issues that occur every single fight. The eye pokes, the groin strikes, for example.
Absolutely, yes, I totally.
Before we start, you can't, to a degree, you can't avoid an eye poke. If someone's going to poke you in the eye, they're going to poke you in the eye. You can avoid a leg stomp by, and I don't want to say simply moving out of the way, but you can prepare for it. Bend the knee, move, shift ever so slightly out of the way, slide out of the way. Just ever so slightly lift your leg so all your weight doesn't go through that leg. But because an eye poke is just such an illegal move, let's address that. Let's address the glove situation to maybe just ever so slight curve, so that you're not, directly. It's ever so slight curve would just, you don't want to hit them with the knuckles, which is a legal strike in the eye. But you can't start outlawing perfectly legal moves just because someone gets a bad injury from them. Because if we do that, we're going to water it down to no strikes to the face. It's how far do you go with it? It's yes, it's not nice to see. It's a awful injury to see, but it's a legal strike.
Yeah, I think he did come out and say it wasn't technically broken. It was just a bunch of torn ligaments, which is still extremely painful. But yeah, we've never seen that in the UFC before. Knee bars and ankle locks are still very valid in the UFC. And if we're going to talk injuries, like you said, eye pokes are much more relevant. I remember Jose Aldo kneed, I think it was Mark Hominick in the chest, and gave him like some weird growth off of his chest bone. Well, let's just ban knees to the chest. Michael Venom Page collapsed the skull of Cyborg. Yeah, ban knees to the skull. These are far more dangerous as well to the chest and to the head than they are to the knee. But yeah, Khalil Rountree was absolutely winning this fight. Keep oblique kicks, like it's martial arts. Keep it as pure as possible. Take away more rules. 12-6 allowed. Knees on the ground allowed. Foot stomps on the ground. I don't care. Do it, guys. Like, figure it out. Like,
the only thing I can't get my head around is soccer kicks to a downed opponent. That gives me, cringes me out. It's
fuck him up. Finish him off.
I mean, I'd be all for it the first couple of times, or the first couple of times I see it. I should say I'd probably be a little bit sort of half eye closed, but then you see people starting to implement into their games, and I'll sort of break it down from more of an analyst point of view. It's like, oh, it's actually quite a good technique, So,
well, Jack Slack brought up a really good point on the soccer kicks and stomps to a grounded opponent, is that they were really rarely used as like a tactical strike. They were always used as this guy's already hurt, and I'll just kick him in the head. So if anything, they were like, I do understand, like they were a bad move to use, because when they were used, you were probably already concussed.
Yeah, exactly. But you could say that about hammer fists. When Masvidal, the sort of half flying knee, half sort of jump knee on Ben Askren, and then landed two. Ben Askren was out cold, and then landed the 2 ground and pound. Should we outlaw ground and pound on a clearly KO'd opponent? No, you fight until the referee pulls you off. So
yeah, absolutely. Could you imagine if soccer kicks were allowed and he just
need him, got up and soccer kicks? That'd be awful, I think. But
they're brutal, and that's
how
why
far do you want to water it down before it turns into kickboxing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I absolutely. We don't want to do a lot of early proto MMA was trying to figure out where they were going to be. So it was kind of like, we're going to do, if you remember, Bob Sapp fought 1 round of kickboxing, and then they took his gloves off, and then they put on MMA gloves and like, okay, this round is MMA. And then they did other stuff of like, okay, so we can do regular kickboxing rules, but as soon as you hit the ground, there's no more punching. Like, just keep it flowy, keep it moving. We don't want to have any weird MMA rules. There's even MMA fights, I think, from early, like Carlos Newton fought in it, but they did a standing 8 count as well, so you couldn't even run to the ground. Just keep it flowy. Like, don't try so many rules. Keep it as much of a clean fight as possible. And when I say clean fight, just like fighters can really express themselves to the fullest degree. They're not worried about like, is a suplex illegal? Is this illegal?
Exactly.
Just fight. You know what I mean?
We're seeing the problems already with the unified rules of MMA in different states of changing and knees to a grounded opponent, and it's causing issues. It is causing issues.
Absolutely.
And yes, it's not every fight night, but the knees to the head of a grounded opponent, or when an opponent's grounded, whether it's three points of contact or 4 points of contact, and does the hand count, and if you lift it, that's causing issues, and that's a fairly easy one to outlaw. You know, these fighters get told in the fight meeting beforehand, we're going the new rules, so the point of contact is 3 or the point of contact is 4. When we start adding more rules to rules that already aren't ironed out, it gets messy, in my opinion.
I totally agree. If you remember, I think it was last month, that young lady who was standing up off the ground, she had 3 points of contact and then got kicked in the head. But that was
against
that was
Cheyenne Bars, wasn't it?
That was the one, and that was legal in where they were fighting, which was Las Vegas. If that fight was in like Montreal or New Jersey, that would actually be an illegal kick. Well, then just make it unified already. Like,
exactly, and then you can't say that she's the best fighter. Yeah, exactly. You know, she you know, Cheyenne Bell is the best fighter when she fights in Las Vegas, but when she fights in like you say in anywhere in Canada, she can't do that. So she might have lost that fight. They're unified rules. They need to be, you know, boxing, for all its flaws, the rules are the rules. Yes, it's to a referee's discretion with regards to clinching and whatnot, but the rules are the rules. You don't have, you know, you have ever slightly, but you don't have completely different rules like that one, where she would have lost the fight in a different, if you know, the fight would have likely played out the exact same if it was in Montreal, like you say, but she would have lost that fight for an illegal strike. But just because it's in Vegas, she wins it, she gets 50K. So it's we've got there's issues to be sorted out before we start messing around with perfectly legal strikes and outlawing those, I think.
Absolutely agree. Major agree on you on all those points. Paddy Pimblett defeats Luigi Evander. I mean, this was the UFC wanted their next golden kid as Paddy Pimblett. They made it very clear that this was a match that they like, and they kind of fed him as much as they could. And Paddy Pimblett did get the highlight. He had a really cool first round finish. But he also got hit a lot in this fight. Like if you are a fighter at lightweight, call up Paddy Pimblett because he's shown a lot of flaws, hasn't he? What did you think of this matchup?
Exactly.
What did you think of the fight?
I wrote getting rocked was the best thing that could happen to Paddy Pimblett. If he goes out and puts on an absolutely flawless performance, like, you know, Tom Aspinall-esque, doesn't get touched, knocks his opponent out, no one's going to be calling his name. No one's going to be answering that phone when they say, you know, we've got a fight. What do you think of you against Paddy Pimblett? Well, let me have a look at his last fight. Oh, what? He didn't get touched. He entered the matrix. You know, he literally didn't get a glove landed on him. I'm not sure if I want that fight. It's not a good fight for me. Because he got hit, he got rocked, and he almost got dropped. He got taken down. These are all holes in this game. You know, Bisping and was it Cormier that was on the broadcast as well? They were both talking. You know, he's backing up with his chin way so high in the air. Mm-hmm. These are all flaws in his game, which, to be honest, for I think he's 16-3 or 17-3 now, should have been outlawed way before entering the UFC. If you're backing up with your chin directly, you know, from a Cyril Gane who was 3-0 entering the UFC, we could have maybe expect that. Mm-hmm. But for a 19 fight prospect, these should have gone way out of his game before he entered the UFC. But this is all good, you know. Getting rocked was the best thing that could have happened to Paddy, because now no one is scared to take that fight so much as, okay, you know, Venderami hit him. I'm a harder hit than Venderami. I could knock him out, you know, and it's going to lead to bigger fights for Paddy Pimblett, in my opinion, because I don't think that they're going to, because of his pro record and because of his brash and his confidence, they can't build him too slow, because he's going to be calling out the bigger names. The bigger names are going to be calling him out, especially because he showed vulnerability, he showed flaws in his game. So yes, absolute quality performance, big knockout. I didn't know that he had that power, to be honest. He's very much a jiu-jitsu guy in his Cage Warriors career. And I'll say again, you know, getting rocked is arguably the best thing that could have happened to Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I wasn't quite seeing it that way. I was just thinking, like, this guy's got clear flaws. He needs to work on so many things. That check left hook was there for Luigi all night. Like, I thought that check left hook was going to end the fight for him. He wasn't defending leg kicks in any way, but I think he came through in ways where kind of the Forrest Griffin talent of I'm better I'm going to outpace you. I'm going to outwork you. I'm going to be more physical than you. You can hit me 10 times. You're going to be tired after those 10 times. So I'm still going to be here. And he just kind of outpaced Luigi, even for a first round fighter. He just rushed at him. He beat him, put a good highlight on, cut a good promo after it. He needs a haircut. But, and then, yeah, so I don't know what's next for him at lightweight, because lightweight is such a, like, you can be in the top 30 at lightweight and still just barely and you're still an amazing fighter kind of thing. So I don't know who's next for him, but I think the UFC really does like Paddy Pimblett quite a bit. But does he get to the top 10 at lightweight? Not fighting like that, right?
Definitely not. I mean, like you say, I think he's got the talent to get to the top 15, top 10 at lightweight, but
Okay.
offensively, defensively, I'm not so sure. He's got a very good ground game. He's clearly got power in his hands, but defensive, if he was just an offensive fighter, he's got that. He's got the skills, as we saw at the weekend. He was probably losing the first round. He had a
Absolutely
good first
yeah.
minute or so.
Yep.
Then the next sort of 3.5 minutes, he was getting landed on, getting taken down, getting beaten, to be honest, getting controlled on the ground, got back up to his feet, and obviously had the power to finish it. I think, I was looking on Tapology, and he's the 58th ranked best lightweight on Tapology, which, yes, it includes Bellator and One and all of these fighters, but in the UFC, we've got names. I just wrote down 3 names. Matt Favola, I think, would be a good fight, because Favola will push the pace just as much as Pimblett, and he's
pick. That's
on a bit
one.
of a losing streak at the moment. Favola, I think he's lost his last 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's going to be up for that fight. We've got Joel Fernandez, who's obviously the Spanish lightweight, who's long. He's got a good ground game, and he's. I match Joel Fernandez up a lot, because he never seems to fight too often, but he's solid when he does. He's got a good record. I think he's 18-3, maybe. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll just have a quick look, but
yeah,
he's a good fighter, and he just doesn't seem to fight as often as, in my opinion. So he's 18-2,
mm-hmm.
and he's on a 3-fight win streak at the moment. He last fought last October, but he's got, in the UFC, he lost his debut, and then he's got 3 finish victories, 2 submissions, and a ground and pound victory. Got the victory over Joe Duffy. He was meant to fight in May, but he had, obviously, with being Spanish, he has visa issues. So
fair is fair.
The guy, he's good. He's only got 2 losses, one in M1 Challenge, and obviously his UFC debut. But he's long, and he's difficult to fight, to be honest. And then we've got Don Madge, the another lightweight, who, he's South African, and he burst onto the scene with that big head kick against Tay Edwards in his debut, but he hasn't fought since 2019. He's had 4 cancelled fights. He was scheduled to fight in July, but he's been scheduled 3 times this year, but all of them have fallen off, and he needs to get back in there. And I think his game, and he'll push the pace, just like but just like Pimblett pushed the pace. Difficult to say, but yeah. But for me, I'd go with Favola. I think he lost to Terence McKinney, who himself seemed to entertain a fight on Twitter. Someone asked McKinney, sort of, how do you think this fight goes? He's like, bring it. So
that's a good matchup there. Yeah,
exactly. There's options for Pimblett, and like I said, because he got rocked, people aren't going to be too scared to face off against him. So I think he's got the options.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, one name I picked out was Bobby Green, because he's kind of he's very much a gatekeeper, but I think Green could probably pick him apart on the feet and then just get out jujitsu'd by him. So there's a lot of really fun opportunity for Paddy Pimblett. We'll see what he does for the future of the UFC, who they match him up against. I do like your matchup picks as well. I think those are fair, fitting matchups for this guy, but he's kind of going to get that special boy treatment. He's going to be a UFC boy. He's going to almost be a headliner, a co-headliner every fight out after this kind of performance. So I think he's got a bright future in front of him.
Sean O'Malley effect, where he should be fighting more difficult opposition, but simply put, he's got enough talent and enough draw that they're not going to put him up against any killers early on because they don't want to risk it, And that's not like what we saw with Conor McGregor. Yes, he burst onto the scene, but he didn't, he fought Max Holloway, although it's not the Holloway we see today. It was a tough fight at Max Holloway at the time. Dennis Silva was a solid competitor at the time. Who else do we have? Diego Brandao.
Diego Brandao,
yeah, exactly. These were tougher fights than, I know it's difficult to make the comparison, but these are all tougher fights than Sean O'Malley has had in his career. You put him up against an aging Eddie Wineland, past it Thomas Almeida, and then when he fights an informed fighter in Marlon Vera, he loses the fight. So it's time Sean O'Malley got to step up in competition, But
Diego Brandao, young in his career, fought Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, and Brian Ortega back when nobody really knew who those guys were.
Exactly, and that's to say that he's had that his record has aged well is an understatement. These are all champions or title contenders.
Yeah,
and this is what I'm saying. You wouldn't get a Paddy Pimblett or Sean O'Malley facing that sort of level of competition. I think Brandao was a tough winner, or at least a tough competitor.
Something like that. I don't quite remember.
And
Marcus Brimage was the other one. Marcus Brimage, and he was a good fighter too. Back
exactly, and that was in McGregor's debut. So,
yes.
Benderi coming off a loss. Should he? Is that a real sort of barometer of the kind of competition that Paddy's going to face in the UFC? No, probably not. And that's why you want but I didn't even think of Bobby Green. I think Bobby Green may even, he's not going to get landed on nearly as much as Venderami. He's got the Philly shell style. Obviously, he's matched up with Aya Quinta at the moment. So I think, the loser of that, even, and Aya Quinta beats Paddy, I think, fairly easily, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
There's lots of good matchups for Paddy, and like I said, none of these people are going to be scared to face Paddy Pimblett. They're going to get the hype around them because he's a big name now and he's burst onto the scene really quickly.
Yep.
And he's got his obvious, clear flaws.
Yep.
So why would you not take that fight?
I completely agree. I absolutely agree. So it was a good week this weekend for UK MMA fighters. More than anything, it was great for American wrestling. American wrestling really shone through this weekend. Anything else on this card that we missed that you want to touch on before we kind of jump into a couple of the other weekend fun things? I mean, Jack Shard got a win. Molly McCann got the win. A few fun things here and there, but a lot of injuries going into this card, unfortunately. So it was just a couple of fights on it. Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think just Jack Shaw put on a performance that I think he probably would be disappointed in, that he didn't get the finish over a late notice opponent, but his opponent wasn't going anywhere. Jack Shaw landed at will on him, and 15-0 now. He's got to have a step up in competition. He was scheduled to fight Saeed Nurmagomedov. That obviously fell off with I think it was an injury, but it's got to be a step up in competition for sure now. I want to see him against a top 15, top 20 opponent because it's time, he's 15-0. You can't keep sort of put him against Sean O'Malley. It's a difficult fight for Sean O'Malley, to be honest.
It is. I mean, if Sean O'Malley doesn't want to step up in competition, he said it on his own podcast. Just I get paid the same. I'll fight bums. I don't care. And I don't blame him. That's great. That's actually a good attitude. You are a prize fighter. You're probably getting paid quite a bit for these fights. You might as well fight some guy in his couple of UFC debuts, right?
Yeah, why not? Like you say, he's getting paid if he fights Jack Shaw, or if he fights Chris Martino coming into the UFC on a week's notice, he's getting paid.
Yeah.
For example, 35 and 35 or 40 and 40. So why would you? He's a smart man, but if he wants to be a UFC champion, he's going the wrong way about it.
No, and that's true. He's keeping his stock high. Now, did we have any fan questions? I know one of them was to discuss ring girls because Khabib Nurmagomedov was talking about ring girls recently. So let's wade into some controversy here. Ring girls, good, bad, kind of dumb. Like, what is your attitude on ring girls? And I'll get into mine.
I mean, to be honest, pointless. I don't think anyone watching a fight. Maybe maybe for boxing because you've got 10 rounds, 8 rounds, 12 rounds, people might lose track, but they're very much, if you're watching it on the TV, you've got round 1, 2 minutes 30 left, for example. Same with the UFC. If you're watching it in person live, 90% of arenas will have a big screen with the same thing as a broadcast, round one, 1 minute left. I think it's maybe a tradition. I don't know the history of it, but there's a tradition from when they didn't have the broadcast, and they obviously don't around. But you don't, in a UFC, for the UFC especially, they're only 3-round fights or 5-round fights maximum.
Mm-hmm.
You don't lose track of what round you're in. If you're watching it like you should be, you're not losing track. It's 5 minutes, then you have a break, then it's 5 minutes, then you have a break, then it's 5. I know, I'm never watching a fight and think, oh God, has this been going on for 10 minutes? It's been going on for 5 minutes. And I just, they don't do any harm, but I think they're just there as, I think they're there to fulfill a purpose of fighting, beer, women. Like, sort of, they're almost ticking the boxes of the stereotypical UFC fan, whereas, with like myself and you, I can guarantee you that in between the rounds, I'm not bothered about the ring girl walking around the octagon and holding up a number 2 or number 1. And I know what round it is because I'm passionately watching it for the from an analytics point of view, rather than, oh, what round are we in now? Oh, is it around? I just don't see the point in them.
I totally agree on you. And I realize maybe we're coming at it from like, are we gotta be snobs. Like you and I have to be snobby guys when it comes to MMA, and our views match. Like, we have to be. But yeah, ring girls are an absolute waste of time, waste of space. It's somehow sexist to both men and women. Like, it does literally just reduce a woman down to an object. She's just an object to show the thing, and then reducing men just down to meatheads of like, you dummies like this, right? You
exactly.
idiot.
Especially, on fight night, it's irrelevant enough for them to be walking around holding up an octagon with a 2 in the middle. But for the weigh-ins, they are literally just the big ceremonial weigh-ins when you've got McGregor and Poirier walking out, you've got Joe Rogan hyping up the crowd, as it were, with the micro. What are they you walk on, you've maybe got maybe a manager and your coach or something, or a teammate or something. They'll hold your stuff, that's fine. You've got Joe Rogan telling the crowd, McGregor weighing in at 155 pounds for the lightweight title. And in the background, you've got just three women in essentially their underwear, just stood there smiling.
Absolutely.
For what reason are they there?
Yep.
And it's not like they're just there for when the males walk out. When you've got, Shevchenko versus Murphy in a few weeks, they'll be there behind them. And it's not like you swap them out for males in their underwear for when the women walk out. And it's just, I just don't, as brutal as it sounds, they hold no purpose. And I'm happy for these women to get work for doing very little.
Sure.
Their full-time job is to stand in their underwear and probably hit the gym 5 days a week to maintain their figure. But I mean, yeah, it's not my cup of tea, to be honest. I just don't really see the point in it. And
politely, you're just like, yeah, I know what you're saying of just being polite about this.
I just don't. Yeah, I don't want to say that they're talentless, because they've obviously got to maintain a certain figure to be a ring girl. But do they add anything to? Do you think of MMA and instantly think of ring girls? Absolutely not. And if they weren't a part of MMA, would I still watch MMA? Of course I would. It makes no skin off my nose if they eradicate them from the sport.
Absolutely. And the cases I've seen for it of like, these are people with a job. Why do you want to see people unemployed? Well, it's a stupid job. Like, I don't, sure, if you want to pay people to do stupid jobs, I'll take one. Thank you. I would love that. That's a great job. And then I've seen people compare it to cheerleading, and I will go out on a limb and say, like, you can cut cheerleading from football too. I don't care. However, cheerleading is legitimately a sport. It is actually judged at the collegiate level. But again, if you cut cheerleading, I wouldn't care at all. But yeah, so ring girls, absolute waste. I think Khabib had it right. People got so up in arms over that. I was like, man, Khabib doesn't like ring girls. What a baby. He's right. There's a stupid thing to have. Who cares?
And he's a mixed martial artist, the purest of forms.
He's a snob like us. We would get on.
Exactly. And I just think, like you say, it's a job that, in my opinion, doesn't need doing. But fair play to them if they can get a job that they don't have. It's essentially they're a full-time walker around an octagon. And if I could be a full-time walker and get front row seats to pretty much every UFC fight,
hell yeah,
I would do it. But again, I don't want to see people unemployed, like you say, but I also, if they weren't there, they're not there. I'm still going to tune in every week and watch the actual fights.
It makes no difference to the broadcast. Any other fan questions that we need to cover off before we
No, I think we covered
alienate
the
her?
one about Izzy and Brunson too. So I think that's pretty much it.
Perfect. We also had Glory 78 this week, and Badahari dropped Verdrosek 3 times before getting knocked out. It was just fun. That was so
crazy.
fun.
I still, I've watched it, the clip of it hundreds of times. How he gets his leg up and straight to the target in such a tight space, the dexterity it makes me cringe, to be honest, but it's impressive.
He just like flicked his foot up. It was just like if you kind of accidentally kick the wall, it's like the same amount of power. He's the guy, the Verdrosek, the Polish, he's a towering guy. He's huge. So when you throw any strike, it's with a lot of power. But yeah, Badahari really struggling in his late career. I'm going to put an article up about him a little bit later on today of just like, this guy is the greatest runner-up in history, because every fight, he should have been the winner so many fights over. And like, he got injured, he got disqualified, he got over aggressive and got beat up. Yeah. So many times this guy could almost be the greatest kickboxer of all time if just like 5 decisions were different. So I'm going to put something up about him later on today. We got the really interesting Artem Vakitov versus Alex Pereira fight. This was the rematch of their last Glory fight back in January for the light heavyweight championship. Pereira was a middleweight champion 5 times. Vakitov was the light heavyweight champion of 5 defenses. They fought last January. It was a close fight, which Pereira won. This was the rematch. Vakitov won it, but it was kind of a weird fight because Vakitov didn't seem to really win it on the scorecards. Pereira got a point taken away, but more importantly, Pereira is moving to the UFC, which is a really weird thing that, like, this fight doesn't matter because I have a different job lined up. I'm actually leaving the sport altogether. So this title doesn't even matter. It's kind of a weird storyline, isn't it?
Yeah, especially because he's already got a UFC fight booked for the Usman Covington 2 card.
Yeah, he's already got a fight booked. Yeah,
and that's in what? That's 2 months. It's in November time, isn't it? The beginning, 6th of November, I think. If he gets brutally knocked out in this one, he's out of that fight. He's the commission isn't clearing him, so it then leaves his opponent. It delays his UFC debut, leaves his opponent needing a new fight. It's strange, but obviously if you sign into a contract with Glory, you sign into that contract and you have to either pay your way out of that contract or fight. And is he going to be too gutted that he lost? Well, he's probably going to make a lot more money in the UFC just for his debut. So,
and I think that's the biggest loss that we've had since there was clearly a combat sports boom in Japan from like 1996 to 2006. I think the biggest loss that we had was kickboxing, because even someone who's a 6-time multi-division champion like Pereira makes more money in the UFC. That sucks. Exactly.
And that's why I've always been surprised that Rico Verhoeven never really truly made the transition over to the biggest stage of MMA.
Yeah,
huge bloke, massive ability in kickboxing.
Yep. Super good. He's like good at distance. He's really good at range. Exactly, but yeah, it sucks that like you almost have to move to the MMA to get paid, rather than just like, I can't just be the greatest kickboxer going right now. I have to move.
Gokhan Saki did it. He had 4 fights in the UFC. We haven't seen him since he got knocked out by Khalil Rountree. It's like, why?
Yeah.
If he's made enough money to sort of in 4 UFC fights, I don't even think we've seen him in kickboxing since, not off the top of my head that I can remember. So why? He's been a career kickboxer, has 4 fights in the UFC and calls it a day. Well, why not? If you're not money driven, clearly he wasn't. Yeah. 4 fights in the UFC, he's obviously done him. He's not going to be going in because of his credentials on the 10 and 10 rate. He's going to be going in much higher than that, 30 and 30 or 40 and 40 even. So, yeah, if you're going to make that money, get out while you can and with your faculty still in place. So why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, Pereira is probably best known for knocking out Israel Adesanya in a kickboxing world championship match. It will be interesting to see if his style can translate over. I could only compare it. Israel Adesanya was an extremely good kickboxer who used a lot of distance management, whereas Gokhan Saki was an inside fighter who put the gloves to his head. So his style didn't translate to mixed martial arts at all, because your small gloves suck for blocking. Pereira is probably a little bit closer to Anderson Silva. He fights a lot like Anderson. He fights more like Anderson Silva than he does like a proper kickboxer, in that he's kind of doing single strikes, trying to land one big counter strike. He does a lot of inside knees, which you can risk in kickboxing because no one's going to try to grab your knee and take you down. But that's kind of his go-to move in the mid-range to close range, as he goes for a jumping knee. So we'll see how his style translates. I hope he does really well because I do like his style. I like kickboxers in the UFC. And did we ever figure out, is he at light heavyweight or is he at middleweight? We were talking about this yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how I think off the top of my head it'll be middleweight. But,
Middleweight.
Because he's fight the guy, I say that, the guy that he's fighting in Mir Hildis, I butchered that pretty badly, but he's got one win and one loss in the UFC, one at light heavyweight, one at middleweight. On Tapology, it says it's at middleweight, but whether, because he's fighting at 209 pounds in kickboxing, it's whatever he weighs in at on the day before, I think is
so that's confusing. What I thought. We didn't quite know if it was going to be middleweight or light heavyweight, because he's fought light heavyweight for about 3 fights in kickboxing now in a row. It's hard to cut that extra 20 pounds down, but I think light heavyweight honestly is probably a better division. It's a much thinner division. It's still a striker's division.
Sure, yeah.
You can have some good success there. One Championship had their atomweight Grand Prix on. It was a lot of fun, and then they decided maybe we'll change the rules, change the results of one of the matches. Did you watch it? Did you catch it as well?
I didn't actually watch it, but I've seen it was yesterday, wasn't it? They came out and said that Silva was going to review the decision. Well, if you want a certain fighter to win, that's fine, but if that fighter then loses, you can't change that decision. For me, that doesn't work. And one, we've always banged the drum of one being one of the best promotions out there,
absolutely,
as far as weight cutting, allowing a lot more as far as rules are concerned. But don't start changing decisions because you're simply not happy with the decision that's been made.
I totally agree. And it was a really fun event. This could have been one of their events that they could point to for years, of like, we did an all-women event and it was probably the best event of the year. Like, every fight was awesome. We had the atomweight Grand Prix going. And now on the controversy, like, I did have Denise Sambawanga winning, but I mean, if they say we're not going to favor control, we're going to favor damage, then yeah, Siu Huham probably did win that fight. But yeah, it's a great event overall. It just is kind of almost overshadowed by you're setting a precedent of, if you don't like the results of a fight, you have the power to change it after the fact. And that's not a good thing. It's a great event overall. My girl, Jackie Buntan, was on there. I do recommend everyone should watch that one. KSW was back, KSW 63. Roberto Soldich did his usual. He's a really good southpaw. He took all the best lessons from guys like Mirko Krokop and whatnot. He does a couple of really great strikes, and he won with ground and pound in this one. A lot of fun there. Anything else we need to cover off before we head out of here?
I don't think so. We've got a bit more of a quiet week on the website this week.
We really do. Yeah, we got nothing going on this week.
Yeah, it's pretty thin on the go. Obviously, got the Contender Series coming up on tomorrow, so we'll have staff picks for that. I think it's probably going to be mostly centered around Anderson Silva and Tito Ortiz.
That's the big fight this weekend.
And Vito, that's the thing. We haven't got BKFC that I haven't really heard much. To be honest, I don't hear, unless it's a Paige Van Zandt fight, I don't hear much of BKFC because she's the poster girl, the golden girl.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we've got it was scheduled to be Vito Balfour versus Oscar De La Hoya. De La Hoya's out with COVID, so now he's been replaced with Evander Holyfield. Whoa,
I totally missed this headline. This is
yeah. And then obviously you got Silva versus Tito Ortiz as a co-main event, and it's just
let's do a quick breakdown on it. Anderson Silva versus Tito Ortiz. Tito Ortiz always sucked at boxing. His hands were the worst part of this game. He was a top position ground and pound guy. He's taken 2 fights over like 4 years in MMA. Anderson Silva just outboxed Julio Cesar Chavez. This fight's going to be at 190 cruiserweight 195. This is Anderson Silva's fight, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, when you say we do a quick breakdown, I think you've just done it. Anderson Silva's just beat Julio Chavez Jr., who hung with Canelo for. Yes, he got dominated, but he hung with Canelo for.
He's a real boxer, is what we're saying. He's not a Logan Paul.
Exactly. And Silva looked good. It wasn't that. Yes, Chavez Jr. didn't take the fight all that seriously, but Silva still looked good. Tito Ortiz has been doing politics, and Anderson Silva's been training day in, day out. And then the main event, we've got Vito Balfour, who is just juiced up to the teeth.
He is on the gear at the moment, isn't he?
his ears have got muscles, his fingers have got muscles like you've never seen. I'm all for it, but why is Evander Holyfield? Why take that fight? I mean, come on.
That's not a good fight for Evander. I know, like, yes, Evander's Holyfield, he could win because he's an old man and he can just lean on you because he's massive. But dude, don't take this fight. You're gonna get hurt in this fight, right? Like Holyfield can't. There's no path to victory here for a 95-year-old. He's 58 years old.
And he's got obviously all the boxing experience over Belfort, and he's got probably still carries the punching power that he had. Not in his prime, but he's probably still carries a fair bit of punching power. But
size advantage, yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. Size advantage and everything. But with that being said, he's taking it on the best part of a week's notice. This news only came out last week. We know that he's been slightly back in training, but he's not going to be training for a fight. And it's a shame because I think, the return of Evander Holyfield should be hyped up like the return of Mike Tyson. And taking on a week's notice, you barely heard anything from it. Obviously, we'll get a lot more this week with it being fight week, but it's just strange. Boxing, legitimate boxing. We saw Katie Taylor in action this weekend.
Yep.
Conor Benn back in action this weekend. These are fighters. These are boxers. Katie Taylor's, in my opinion, the best Irish combat sports athlete. They're better than McGregor. Carries herself better than McGregor, and yet we don't really hear anything. And then you've got the circus of Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley and Evander Holyfield versus a juiced up Tito and a juiced up Vitor. Probably a juiced up Tito is going to be knocking around as well. And
what about
all over,
what about the O'Donovan brothers? They're the greatest Irish athletes. Ireland weirdly produces great athletes of just like, if they're going to make an athlete, they're going to become the greatest thing of all time kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. They don't do anything by half measures, which is impressive.
Yeah, no, Katie Taylor's super great to watch as well. She's an amazing boxer, like you said. Evander Holyfield coming back in his almost 60s. It's not a fair matchup of fighting a guy who was fighting just a couple of years ago against top 5 competition. This is a shameful one. If you wanted Evander coming back, Bob Sapp would have been a better fight. Bob Sapp would have been a totally fair fight, or someone like that. Of like you're in your sunset years, not even sunset years. You're in your nighttime career. Like,
exactly, man, exactly. And I'm sure we'll break it. Not even break it down next week. I'm sure we'll pass comment on it next week. But
it's like that was disgusting.
It's nothing to rest assured that it won't be. It won't take up too much of next week's show.
So send in some questions because it's going to be a tough show next week. So please send in some questions. Actually, I think we have the Volkanovski versus Ortega to break down next week. That'll be a fun one. Is that next week?
I think it's Anthony Smith, Ryan Spann, which is definitely get your questions in because that is a thin card.
Yeah, you're right. Please send in your questions next week, folks.
If not, we'll talk off air a little bit about what we can do. A couple of fantasy matchmaking pieces next week, a little bit more in depth on that, and yeah, we'll still give you a show, don't worry.
Perfect. Great weekend of fights, folks. Thanks for tuning in. MMA Sucka Show. My name's Tim Wheaton. Check me out, Tim Wheaton MMA. Make sure to stick it to MMA Sucka and check us out on Twitter and Instagram, but especially the website. Frazer, what do we got going on this week? Where can we find more of you?
Yeah, so Frazer_Krohn on Twitter, and obviously I'm all over the MMA Sucka website. We've got plenty, despite it being a slightly more quiet week, UFC and Bellator and PFL and One Wise, which are obviously the 4 main promotions we cover mainly. We might have an MMA What If piece coming out. We've got plenty of stuff up on the website, so be sure to check it out, MMASucka.com.
Thank you so much, folks.
Thank you very much.